So today we're going to do, and we've covered a little bit of this before. I should make a poster of this. We're going to do something called the Enneagram. Okay, so you don't know about this, but I'm going to give a little background. But we're going to do Enneagram and grief. Okay, so the Enneagram is a mystical tool. This is the beautiful drawing from Aniela, because I am incapable of drawing anything, as you guys have seen over the months. And I'm going to pass around a book, okay? This is a really, really great book. If you are into this, and I highly recommend that you look into some of this. One of the things that I want to do in this program is introduce you to different things like archetypes and other personality tools so that you can see that there are different ways of getting to people's sort of ego structure, okay? Students are intimidated with how will I know the type of client that I have, you know, what they need. You were amazing the other day. You did well.
That's because I'm in the class.
Okay, but it's because of the things that you've learned.
Yeah.
You know, you're here, you're present.
No, but also I'm like scared of like when I'm actually out there in the real world, like.
But practicing is the way.
I cry, so like when the patient is like talking
But you didn't
to me,
cry.
I'm
You didn't cry on Thursday.
No, well, of course.
You were serious. You were totally respectable. You were like on. It was wonderful. Okay? So these tools, whether it's the language of the psyche, whether it's the I and the we, whether I saw you looking at your chart, you know, whether it's archetypes, these are different ways of getting to know the client's sort of, you know, psychological or personality structure. This is just one more way. This is called the Enneagram. This has been around for a while. If you Google Enneagram, you're going to find a ton of online free tests. I highly recommend that you do. Yes, go ahead. Don't do it during class, but I do recommend that you take the test. And what it is it's 9 distinct personality styles. And don't be shy to give this to your clients if this is something that you're into, okay? So I saw Nicole looking at her chart. And just like when we do archetypes, or just like when we look at astrology charts, which are linked to the archetypes, the Jungian archetypes, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out who is this person in front of us. Nobody is one-sided, okay? But we have a gist of who we are, okay? People are people and they don't really tend to change. So I was driving back from Fort Myers on Sunday, and I was listening to this interview with this 5-year-old girl and her father. And the father wrote an article in the Washington Post, how to raise an extrovert in a world of introverts. And apparently, introverts now are the thing to be. Who knew? Because I've always considered myself an extrovert, but lately I've noticed that I'm much more introverted. It's almost like my life experience has sort of made me more introverted because I'm much more vulnerable. And I was at a dinner party this weekend, and my girlfriend was talking, and she was all, you know, she had a glass of wine or two in her, and she was all talkative, and I was more quiet. And I shared a little bit of, you know, with the guest at the dinner party, but she was much more talkative than I was. And she was like, was I too talkative? And I said, no, not at all. I said, you were great. So I'm here looking at her saying, wow, I wish I was as talkative as her and as interesting as her and knew all the things that she knew. And she's probably looking at me saying, oh, I wish I was as quiet as Frances. And you know, you're always kind of comparing. So they interviewed this 5-year-old girl. And at the end of the interview, the interviewer says to the girl, "What advice do you have for people that aren't as extroverted as you so that they can become extroverted?" And she goes, "You can't change. You are who you are." You know, with this high-pitched, super cute little voice. She was adorable. And she goes, "If you're quiet and shy, then you're shy, and you accept your friends the way they are, and and it was so cute." And she, at this young age, was kind of accepting, I'm extroverted, my friends are introvert, and that's just who you are. And in a lot of these personality profiles, which is not the MMPI, but the other one, the one that gives you the 4 letters, the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs, which is another one like this, that you could do online for free. So Aniela, you can look up that one as well. You get a letter, a 4-letter combination, and one of the letters is either E or I, one for extrovert, one for introvert. So you could do these with your clients. If you kind of want to have an idea of who your client is, these are, I'm going to use the word crutches, but they're not necessarily crutches. If it's something that's going to make you feel safe, if it's going to make you feel that you're going to have a better, idea of who your client is, they're very valuable tools. They're out there, and you have an idea of who the client is. Why not? They're out there, they're usable, there are courses out there, there are trainings out there, So what I wanted to do today was kind of use a little bit of the Enneagram personality style and talk about how people with each of the 9 types deal with grief, okay? Because each of the different types of people deal with grief differently. So first let's talk about the 9 types. And then I'm going to read them off. And you could take some time on your own to, let me pass around this book if you want to just take a look. This one's called the Enneagram of Passion and Virtues, and they're sort of like a high-functioning version of the person and a low-functioning version of the person. So if you're working in your passion, for instance, you might be functioning out of fear. If you're working in your high-functioning version of you, you might be functioning out of courage. So each type has a high function and a low function. And we all know that we have the high version of ourselves and a lower version of ourselves. So you could take a look around. That's one of a gazillion books that are out there on the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is actually a tool that's been around for years. It's believed to be a mystical tool. They don't really know the origin of it, but it's believed to come from the Sufi tradition. And the Sufi tradition is the mystical arm of Hinduism, of the Muslim, of the Islam tradition. And are you guys familiar with the whirling dervishes? The whirling dervishes, I would highly recommend Googling a video of the whirling dervishes. These are Sufis and they're mystics, and what they do is they wear like these skirts and these hats, and they go around in these dances, and they believe to dance ecstatically and go round and round and round in circles until they connect with the divine. And they get connection, or they're believed to get, connection with the divine. And this is a very typical Sufi tradition sort of practice. And this is believed to come from the Sufi tradition, but it's not 100% known. One of my favorite philosophers, which those of you who have been in the class have heard me mention, and I always mess up his name, is Gurdjieff. He taught this tool to his followers, or to his, the people that believed in his philosophy. So this has been around for many, many, many years. and there's different ways to use it. This particular book is much more mystical in nature, but there's many ways to use this tool. But you can just use it as a personality profile with clients, and you can kind of get an idea of who the client is, what their typical type is, and what their higher function, what their lower function. It's like an archetype, and then we'll look at the grief. So the number 1 point, which is here, is called the reformer. And then I'd like for you guys to share based on just what I described, what you think you might be, okay? And then you can go and take the test and see if it kind of correlates. Number 2 is the helper, and the name might already indicate to you. The 3 is the achiever. I think I have an achiever in here. The 4 is the individualist. I think I might have one of those in here too. Just saying. The 5 is investigator. And not to say that there isn't overlap. Remember, we're not one-dimensional. We have a lot of facets, okay? 6 is the loyalist. 7 is the enthusiast. 8 is the challenger. And 9 is the peacemaker. So just by the names, do you think that you might resonate with any of these? 3, 4, and 8?
At 5, kind of.
Okay, yeah, I can totally see you as a 3 and a 5. I see Paula definitely as a 4 and an 8.
Me?
Yeah.
Really? Hold on.
Yeah, because and now if we go to the archetypes, we can definitely see, so when we look at Aniela, what would we see her in terms of, I mean, Aniela's definitely the sage. She's that wisdom, she's always the one that's seeking. She's also very Pluto, she's that magician, she's the one that's exploring, investigating. She knows that she wants to be a PsyD, a clinician. You are very Uranus, which is very rebellious. Okay, so for me, I think of things in terms of planets, of archetypes in terms of planets. For Mr. Apache, I think of the moon, I think of the helper, I think of the peacemaker. For Pedro, I definitely think of the loyalist. I don't know you enough.
I would say challenger.
Okay.
4.
And I also see a peacemaker in you too. I see some peacemaker in you. And it just might be a facade. It might just be masks. It may not be your original type. But based on what you've shared with us, the fact that you want to have your family with you, but it might just be a response to what has occurred to you in childhood. And that's one of the interesting things about these tools, is that when you give someone a personality profile and they sort of pinpoint their type, you can see what is more legitimately them versus what's more of a mask that they're wearing because of something learned, something based on an experience. So let's read a little. Okay, type 1. Principled, purposeful, self-controlled, and perfectionist. Anyone feel perfectionist? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so put that down, that you have traits of that. And you had mentioned that, right? You had said reformer. Okay. I definitely have a perfectionist streak which serves nothing. Serves absolutely nothing. I recommend
Stressed out.
that if you are a perfectionist, to throw that out the window right away. Perfectionism does not exist. Yesterday we had a student that we met with, and she was so much with perfection, perfection, perfection. And something that I told a colleague of mine, an employee of mine many years ago, perfection does not exist. Why don't we strive for excellence? Because all you do when you strive for perfection is set yourself up for failure. This is a very 0 to 100. Perfection is very 0 to 100. It's very much setting yourself up for failure, and it's very black and white, okay? But it's people that have often been knocked off of a pedestal. So if you can think of a time, oftentimes from a very young age, where you were knocked off of a pedestal, this is oftentimes people that have these perfectionist streaks, okay? So oftentimes in the questions that you'll see in these Enneagram personality tests, you'll see questions like that will pick up on the perfectionism. Type 2, who thinks they're type 2? Okay. Generous, demonstrative, people-pleasing, and possessive.
Yep, I'm definitely that.
Okay.
See, I don't think I'm that.
You don't think you're possessive?
No.
Okay. Now, why?
What don't I think? I don't think of myself as being the type of person that needs to hold on to people or hold on to things. That's what I think of as possessive. You know, I mean, I want people to in my life, but
You just won't.
right, I'm using it as a negative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
entirely
I'm using it as a negative.
I mean, it's true.
So, but I don't see what the positive would be.
Is it?
Well,
But
we
isn't
have
that-
to get used to seeing these things as two sides of the coin. So I can see where you might be possessive with your children.
Oh, okay, yes,
Isn't that?
yeah, true.
But.
Don't mess with my kids.
Exactly. So it's not
That's true.
necessarily a bad thing,
Right,
but it's definitely possessive.
But
right. That's,
Hold
I
on,
guess
Yeah.
I want
Right?
to ask.
Yeah, I see
I want to
that.
ask because possessive it's not the same as controlling, or is it?
It's
like
intertwined.
the same?
there's a little bit of that. That's what I'm
Yeah,
that's
thinking
right,
of.
They
yeah.
can overlap.
That's what I'm thinking of. So
Yeah.
They can overlap.
I have degrees of being a control freak,
Yeah.
but I'm using it in the context of people, then I don't think I am.
Now, what I know about her chart, it's in there. This is where the astrology chart definitely comes in handy.
She knows pretty much more about me than I do.
But what I've noticed, and something that I saw in her chart just the other day when we were looking at it, it's very clear that there were two Adrianas. There was like the Adriana pre-family and the Adriana post-family.
Yes.
And so the possession or the control is pre and then post. And with the children, which is appropriate, absolutely appropriate, but I'm just going to pick on you for a moment.
Okay.
Her son is turning 13 in a few days. And in what, like a day?
Tomorrow. Yes.
And she will not say that he is 13 until tomorrow.
Exactly. Not yet.
They never grow up, that's the thing.
You know, it's like that type of possession, you know, and that's okay. Parents don't want their children to grow up. 13 is a very marked age. You know, it's adulthood, it's 13. Now this person is a teenager. So that's the type of possession. But this is what's interesting about this particular tool, or learning things about our client, is that they're going to see these things as flaws when they're not. They're just on a spectrum. You know, these things are just, if you're here or you're here, then you're here or you're here. You know, it's just where these things are just spectrums.
And your experiences as you grow changes who you are, and it changes how you think of things.
Absolutely.
So yes, there's definitely a me. I mean, even talking about the introvert, extrovert. I was an introvert as a child. I learned to become an extrovert. So it's not, nothing is ever written in stone. It's because of your experiences make you who you are. You know, so because you were one way, you know, it's what got you to where you are now.
And you're just on that spectrum of that person,
Right.
of who you were. Last night I was listening to this show, and this gentleman who's winning awards for makeup artistry, this Taiwanese makeup artist who's going to be winning awards now for whatever, I don't know if it's the Oscars. He was in a concentration camp or a labor camp. He was in a shipwrecked, his mom put him in like on a boat. He was shipwrecked, and he was put on in a concentration camp or a labor camp. And he was saying that. He's like, I am not, you know, it's not a problem that these things happen to me. I am now in the Oscars because of those things happening to me. So he can understand that those are the things that were the spectrum that made him who he has now become. And without those experiences, you know, he would not have become this person. And we have to understand this or believe this. So we're always that person in flux. We're always that person in flux, and these qualities are there. Now, certain circumstances are going to bring them out. I now have really realized some of my core features, because now that I'm raw, like I was always told when I was in acupuncture many, many years ago, I was about 19 years old, my teacher would say that I was the peacemaker. In Chinese medicine, you use the 5 elements to talk about people's health and personality styles. It's another way, kind of like this. In Ayurveda, we also use the 5 elements to talk about personality styles and things like that. So there's many ways to do this. This is nothing new. And he would refer to me as the peacemaker, and he would talk about my spleen. And that was like the organ. And he would be like, you're somewhat passive, and you want to people please, and you do this, you do that. And then as I grew, I became somewhat angry, and I became somewhat aggressive. Well, now that I've sort of been stripped of those masks, now that I've been stripped of those facades, that I'm back to my rawness, I'm kind of seeing that that really is who I am. I'm kind of just this person who doesn't really want confrontation. I don't really, I want peace. I really just want peace. I don't want conflict. I don't want too much hassle. I don't want too much drama, even though I've had it in my life. Those were circumstances that were created as a result of life circumstances. But really, my essence is much more of a peacemaker. When I was reading in How I Grieve, one of the things, ironically, and you know, when I share the grieving modalities, for each of them was wanting others to feel comfortable. And I noticed that during the cancer. It was like everybody had to feel comfortable, and I got to a point where I was like, I want to die. Like, this chemotherapy makes me want to die. And the fact that my marriage was over made me want to die, and everybody was so uncomfortable with me saying that I just had no reason and no will to live. I had my kids as a reason, but I had no will. And it was making everyone uncomfortable, and I had to get to the point that I was comfortable saying that. But really my essence was wanting to make everybody feel good about what I was saying. And so a lot of us are just wearing these masks, but if we pull them back, then we really see the core essence is what it's always been. And that's usually, and in my model, when I say, who were you as a child? Describe yourself as a child. If I asked everybody to describe themselves as a child, that's pretty much what you're going to see. And I was just an easy-go-lucky, I was just very peaceful, I always got along with everybody, I had no drama, I was, I was like, almost like the preferred kid, I was the one on the pedestal, until I got knocked off the pedestal. And if we really ask our client, tell me who you were as a child, you're gonna get the essence of who they were. Before that 0 to 7 drama, before that trauma, that's who they are. That's what this is gonna bring you to. That's what this archetype is about. And that's the essence.
I don't
The
see that
resonance?
at all. Because when I was a kid, I would say I was a peacemaker. I might still be a little bit of a helper. I am definitely a loyalist.
Okay, but you don't see it now?
I don't see it. No, I see, like I said, the helper, I see it a little. The loyalist, I am, but sometimes I like the cheeseman. So that's why, but.
I think we all like the cheeseman.
But
That's just human nature. That's on everyone's spectrum.
Yep.
yeah.
Just being in the flesh.
But the loyalist to an extent, like I said, I like what I'm going through right now with my brother.
Okay.
That's something that I definitely, things that people tell me that it's not my place to tell someone else their secret or their, because it's not. I mean, we're all adults. So it's like I told my brother, that's on you. Whenever you want to come out, I'm not here to tell mom anything. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to support you. And when that time comes, then just know that I'm here. And I know my mom's going to have she's going to go pray to God to switch everything. But
why do you say that you don't see that from when you were a child? Because you've shared with us how you've taken care of your brother as a child.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I don't see it. I still see it to an extent. Because sometimes people will tell me stuff and I'll be like, I always saw it in them. I always see things in people before they even tell me.
Okay.
And so, but I can't, I could keep it only so long within myself before I have to go tell someone else because I'm about to explode.
Okay. Well, maybe that's not your primary, personality trait.
Yeah.
Maybe you're more of a helper, per se, which is very applicable to a counseling field.
Yeah.
You know.
And maybe
the reformer, or maybe the rebel, or maybe the challenger, or maybe the individualist is more of a learned behavior.
Yeah.
Maybe that's been a mask that you've had to learn in order to survive with your mother.
Yeah, and the peacemaker too. When I was little, I didn't handle it, and I always wanted to please people. So
And I think in a way you do that with your mom. I
Yeah.
think you people please a lot with your
Yeah.
mom.
So.
You kind of resume a role as a child
Right.
because she wants you to do that, even though you're an adult and a parent in that home environment.
Yeah.
So
Which
you'll
is
see,
why
we're multifaceted. We're
Which is where I've had to work on it and actually put the brakes on her too, because.
right, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But
So
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see when you guys do it. Just Google it; they're free online.
Yeah.
You did what?
3 and 4.
Okay, so achiever, investigator. And that goes in alignment with all the Scorpio in your chart, because that's all of that Pluto, all of that magician.
But it was on point, because I got 3 and 5 as the lead ones, but then
Okay.
I got 4 and 8 too,
Okay.
so it was kind of right.
Yeah. And we can kind of sense our essence. And oftentimes you'll sense the essence of your client. Okay, type 3. So we've got the achiever, adaptable, excelling, driven, and image conscious.